Good evening, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining this evening's live telephone town hall with Congressman Adam Smith. My name is Robin, and I'll be moderating the call this evening. This is an interactive call, and we're looking forward to taking as many questions as we can from constituents like you. If you'd like to ask a question, please press *3 on your telephone keypad now or at any time during the call. You may also sign up for our newsletter by pressing *6 at any time during this call. Again, if you'd like to ask a question, please press *3, and if you'd like to subscribe to the Congressman's e-newsletter, press *6. Now, without further delay, I'd like to turn this call over to Congressman Adam Smith. Congressman, you are live, and the floor is yours, sir. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, and thanks to everybody for joining us tonight. There's a lot going on. I'll try not to talk for too long because I want to get to your questions and comments, but I want to tick through a couple of issues and let you know how I am thinking about where we are at right now. I mean, first of all, it is my opinion that the Trump administration is in clear violation of the law and violation of the Constitution, and I am deeply concerned about the efforts that the Trump administration is making that seem to be pushing us away from the basic concepts of our representative democracy. Now, I know a lot of people don't like language that strong, but what I have seen is the most profound threat to the basic concept of our republic that I have seen in my lifetime. The law is being violated to begin with by simply the president unilaterally deciding not to spend money that Congress has appropriated on a wide variety of programs, both foreign and domestic. That's illegal. If the president wants to propose a budget, now that he is president, he can do that. But to go back into programs that exist and cut them off, and this is happening all over the country. Today, I met with some folks with Head Start. I met with some other folks who were working on workforce development programs. At different times, they've had programs frozen. Across the country, we're seeing that. That was illegal to do that in the first place. And then you had a court ruling that said it was illegal and required the president to stop cutting off those programs. And yet those programs continue to be cut off. And the excuse that the administration is giving, well, it's complicated to turn it back on. But they certainly appear to be violating direct court orders. And these court orders are working their way up through the various appellate court process. But once you get a federal court ruling, you have to obey it. You can appeal and wait for the outcome of the appeal, but you can't disobey the order. And in my opinion, that's what's happening. I'm also concerned about the fact that the president pardoned everybody around the January 6th attacks. People who violently assaulted police officers were let go. Now, I will grant you the president has that power, but it is also an approach to the presidency that has a complete disregard for the rule of law, and that is troubling. Also, he has targeted former members of the federal government and cut off their security details and cut off their security clearances. Chairman Milley is one that is that I'm most aware of. You know, he's under threat from Iran precisely because he carried out an order that President Trump gave him to do in the killing of a guy named Soleimani in Baghdad. And President Trump pulled a security detail, not because the threat was gone, but because Donald Trump doesn't like Mark Milley, because Milley dared to criticize him. We've seen members of the press barred from press conferences because they say things the president doesn't like. This is not the way you behave in a representative democracy. So I think we need to talk about that. And we say, look, if you care about democracy, if you care about the rule of law, you should be concerned. I do, and I am. Second, it does have concrete impacts on people. The programs that are being shut down are affecting people's livelihoods in a number of different areas and also affecting, well, safety to begin with. A number of employees have been laid off from the FAA, responsible for air safety. They already were understaffed. That was one of the challenges. And now they've lost, I don't know the exact number, but over 1,000 employees, making that more difficult. The NNSA, I always forget exactly what that stands for, but it's basically the National Nuclear Security Agency. They're the people who are in charge of making sure that the nuclear weapons that we possess and develop are safe. 300 of the 1,800 people who work there were given layoff notices. And after that, and after they left, someone said, you know, we kind of need these people. And now in a panicked effort, the Trump administration is trying to get them back. I confess I don't know exactly how that effort is going, but it is incredibly alarming. We've also laid off a ton of people doing important scientific research on things like, I don't know, curing cancer. And again, all of this was done in direct violation of what Congress passed into law. And it's a violation of the law, and it's not the way the president is supposed to act or behave, and it's having very, very detrimental impacts on people all across the country. Now, supposedly, what Trump and Musk are doing has two main purposes. One is to make the government more efficient, more effective, go after waste, fraud, and abuse, right? Except that they are firing people based on how long they've been there. They're firing probationary employees, thousands, tens of thousands of them. So these are people who have been in the federal government for less than 2 years. That's got nothing to do with how good a job they're doing. He's just randomly firing all of those people. That's not going to make us more efficient and more effective. It's going to have the exact opposite effect. It's going to cripple the federal government's ability to do anything. If you wanted to make the federal government more efficient and more effective, go after the rules, the regulations, and the requirements that are so cumbersome to sort of to navigate your way through to get anything done. So it's not making us more efficient and more effective. And on top of that, he's shutting down entire agencies. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which is charged with protecting us against, well, I don't know, billionaires like Elon Musk and how they want to make investments in a variety of different things, completely shut down, not doing its job anymore. We all know about the shutdown of USAID. Programs that were already approved that were, feeding starving people all across the world and providing health care to desperate people were shut down. And also the federal employees who were fired were simply left all across the world with no help whatsoever to get home. This is not making government more efficient and more effective. It is simply smashing federal government's ability to be efficient and effective. So troubled by that. And the second big argument is that this is being done for the sake of fiscal responsibility. I was on TV a couple days ago with Chris Cuomo on News Nation with a Republican from Georgia, Richard McCormick, who I serve with on the Armed Services Committee, decent guy, who went on at great length about the reason we have to do all of this is because the debt is too high and the deficit is too high. And he made a reasonably compelling argument about the importance of fiscal responsibility. We can argue about that. But the budget resolution that the House Republicans are putting on the floor next week for a vote would add over $2 trillion to the deficit because it cuts taxes by $4.5 trillion. So this can't be about fiscal responsibility if your plan adds trillions of dollars to the deficit. Meanwhile, it proposes about $900 billion in cuts to Medicaid. So we're going to cut money for poor and working class people so that we can give even greater tax breaks to the wealthy and the big corporations in this country. At a time, by the way, when we have never seen such a concentration of wealth at the top. In my opinion, and President Trump, when he was campaigning, talked a lot about this, economic opportunity is the single biggest problem and issue that we face. We've got roughly 60% of the American people who struggle every day to pay their bills. Meanwhile, we've got an almost unimaginable amount of wealth in the hands of the top 1% or the top 0.1%. Mr. Musk himself is worth, last time I looked, somewhere around $350 billion. So dealing with that issue is crucially important, but you don't get there by cutting taxes for the people who already are part of that top 1% or 20% or whatever, and then devastating programs like Medicare that are so crucial for the working poor in this country. So it doesn't meet either of those standards, and I'm deeply concerned about that. Two more, and understand this budget resolution that's coming up next week is part of the reconciliation process. And I urge everyone to do everything you can to reach out. Obviously, I'm your member of Congress and I'm voting no. But talk to your friends. We need to defeat that if there's any hope for having a just economy going forward. Two other issues, and then I'll turn it over to your questions and comments. We also still have fiscal year 2025 appropriations process, which has not been completed. And currently, the government is only funded until March 14th, so next month. Sorry, the discretionary portion of the budget is funded until then, and then we run out. And there's an argument right now about, how do we deal with that? I am in favor of passing appropriations bills. Set the top line numbers and get the appropriations bills passed. There's a group of about 30 to 50 Republicans in the Freedom Caucus in the House who don't want to do that. They don't want to fund the government. They just want to do a continuing resolution, which is devastating to programs and no way to run a government. We need to pass appropriations bills. So come March 14th, we're going to have to resolve that issue. So keep an eye on that one. Lastly, and there's a lot going on in foreign affairs, but I'll just focus on President Trump blaming Ukraine for Russia invading it. That is incredibly troubling and completely wrong. And I want to be clear, I support a negotiated settlement to end the war in Ukraine. It is a devastating war, devastating most of all to the people of Ukraine, but also having global impacts as well. So let's get to a negotiated settlement. But you don't get to a negotiated settlement by simply acquiescing to everything that Putin believes. You have to say, we are going to support Ukraine. We are going to make sure that they can defend themselves. If Putin thinks that he can go all the way to Kyiv, he's going to go all the way to Kyiv. We have to make it clear that he can't do that, and then you can force him to the negotiating table. But hearing the President of the United States on the global stage blame Ukraine for Russia's invasion of Ukraine is just appalling. I wish I could say it was unbelievable. It's not unbelievable, but it is shocking and appalling, completely inaccurate, and underestimates the threat that we face. I want peace. I want a negotiated settlement. I don't want us to insist that the war goes on until Ukraine gets everything back. But I also want us to make sure we have an adequate deterrent to what Putin is doing, because he's also threatening Moldova right next door. And the Baltic states and Poland and Romania feel threatened by him as well. So I am worried about what the president has been saying about that and the negotiations that he's entered into. But overall, the biggest challenge is we have to preserve our democracy. People should follow the law, follow the Constitution, and you shouldn't be punished by the federal government because you say something critical of the president. Also troubled, of course, by the Eric Adams pardon that appeared to have been a quid pro quo, that they dropped the charges against Eric Adams in exchange for him, agreeing to Trump's immigration policy. That's not the way the Justice Department is supposed to work. So that too is troubling, which reminds me I didn't get into the discussion about the immigration issues or the tariffs or a wide range of things. There's a whole lot going on. My overall narrative theme is that the president's policies that he's implementing are not doing what he said he was going to do when he was campaigning. He's not doing anything about inflation. I mean, talking about invading Greenland, making Canada the 51st state, invading Panama, and kicking all the Palestinians out of Gaza is not doing anything about inflation. So let's get back to policies that really help working people in this country, and that's what I'm going to be advocating for. Like I said, a lot going on, could go on for a while, but I want to give you a chance. Give me your comments, questions, issues you think I ought to be working on. So I'll turn it back over to the moderator, and I look forward to hearing from all of you.
Thank you, Congressman. And listeners, please, we had mentioned this is an interactive call. We're looking forward to taking your questions. If you have a question, please press *3 on your telephone keypad now. Congressman, your first question is submitted online by Angela. Angela says, misinformation is a huge concern. Where can people turn for a single, reliable source of truth that is free from bias, sir?
Yeah, I agree. Misinformation is a huge problem. And I think the answer to the question is you can't turn to any single source. If you get a piece of information, double check it against other sources and use common sense about it. What seems like it could be true seems like it doesn't, and then always double check. If you search through various different places on the internet, there's a bunch of different sources that can help you out when you hear an allegation. Don't just believe it, whether it's something that comports with your worldview or not. Double check, challenge the assumptions, and be logical about it. Another thing that I'm deeply troubled by. I mean, Elon Musk has taken over Twitter, now called X, and is driving out all manner of misinformation. He had a long thread about how the CIA and the USAID had conspired together to impeach President Trump, which is simply insane. That's not what happened. He's spreading it all over the place. And then, of course, he shuts down USAID. And by the way, he asked every single employee at the CIA to take early retirement. What if they all had? We'd suddenly have no intelligence service. That's the type of chaos that they're sowing, and they're using the misinformation to do that. So challenge the assumptions, always go to more than one source to really try to get at what's going on. And also, don't buy this free speech nonsense that somehow, Musk is in favor of free speech and J.D. Vance lectured about free speech. They're shutting down speech all over the place that they don't like. Musk regularly shuts people off of X when they say things that he doesn't like. We've got the Department of Defense pulling books off the shelf that talk about, gay or trans people because we don't want them to say that. They are suppressing free speech very aggressively as well. Now, they like to have the freedom to say whatever they want, whenever they want, no matter how nonsensical it is without it being challenged. But that's not the same as being in favor of free speech. I'm in favor of free speech, and I think what you have to do to sort out the misinformation is what I said at the beginning. Double check, go to other sources, double, triple check information to make sure it's accurate, and don't leap to conclusions when you don't have to leap to conclusions. You hear a bit of information that sounds shocking and alarming, don't retweet it, okay? Don't say, oh my God, did you see this? Figure it out first, and then proceed from there.
Thank you, Congressman. Your first caller is Diana from Seattle. Diana, you're live on the call with the Congressman. Please go ahead and ask your question, Diana.
I'm so frustrated with what appears to be nothing being done against Trump and Musk. And I'm sure I don't understand how government works, but it just feels like the Democrats aren't doing anything, and it's scaring me. So I guess the question is, what can you do, or what can we do?
Well, first of all, there's a lot going on. And one of the best, the two things that we can do, the courts. I mentioned some of the lawsuits. Those lawsuits are really important. And we are filing lawsuits on a wide range of issues. Now, the president's trying to flood the zone and violate the law in 1,000 different ways. We're keeping up with them. There are dozens of different lawsuits. There are multiple court decisions now blocking actions that he has tried to take. And he has obeyed some of them, not obeyed all of them. So it's helpful. It does slow him down and it brings attention to it. But even if he violates the court order, the next step is you go back to the court and you get the person sanctioned. If a court gives you an order and you don't obey it, you can be sanctioned. That means fined and in some cases imprisoned. So we're going to pursue that. The second most important thing we can do is what I'm doing right here and what I've been doing all day. I've had a whole bunch of different meetings. I did an interview with USA Today. I did an interview with Cairo. I'm forgetting several other conversations that I had, all driving home this message that we're talking about, to try to persuade the American people to push back, because Congress will have to vote for some aspects of this plan. And if the Republicans in Congress feel that their constituents are not supportive of it, they won't vote for it. And we're beginning to make progress on that. People are waking up. I saw some footage from a town hall meeting from, again, my friend Richard McCormick, with people very upset at him. And it seemed to surprise him. Medicaid. Medicaid is an important program, more so in Republican areas than Democratic areas. The state of Louisiana, I forget the percentage, but it's some unbelievably high percentage of the population in Louisiana gets Medicaid. And Speaker Mike Johnson is going to cut that by $900 billion. That message is getting out. So every day you have to drive the message. And we are. Now, if you want to say, how come Democrats haven't already stopped this? Well, you're right. We haven't already stopped this. But you have to build momentum, and that's what we're doing. Every day, you've got a lot of voices out there calling out every aspect of this, pointing out, the fact that, parks are being shut down. People can't access to them because all the park employees have been fired now. Pointing out that Head Start programs are being shut down because those funds were cut out. Pointing out that the Nuclear Safety Organization doesn't have enough employees to keep our nuclear weapons safe. All right. Those arguments begin to build momentum and begin to turn people around. Now, I personally share your frustration. Seems to me that this ought to be obvious by now. I don't know why. Well, not true. I'll get to one aspect of that. Personally, I think January 6th was disqualifying. Once you tried to overturn a duly elected president and a duly elected election, that should have been it. But people were concerned about that. The other thing, we as Democrats can do is build our support, offer a reasonable alternative, show that we've learned from some of the concerns that people had about us and address them. So that's what's happening. And there's a lot going on. There are literally millions of people, not just elected Democrats, but millions of people who are concerned about our democracy, number one, and two, about the impact of the random cuts and random firings that Trump and Musk are doing. So there's a lot happening. And if you ask the question, should we be doing more? Yes. My answer to that will always be yes. I get up every day thinking about, how can I send out the message? What can I do on social media? What interviews can I do? Who should I talk to? How can I spread the story of this group that I met with that's being impacted by it? Who should I call, in the House and the Senate to try to persuade them to push back on this agenda? So always be doing more, but there's a lot going on.
Thank you, Congressman. Once again, folks, please remember to press *3 if you'd like to ask a question. Our next caller is Matthew from Bellevue. Matthew, you are live on the call with the Congressman. Please go ahead and ask your question, Matthew.
Where's it at, though?
Hello?
Oh.
Please go ahead and ask your question. Hello?
Yep.
Hi. Hi. My question is, what do we do about kids in school? How do we keep kids safe when they're in special ed and when they're asking questions about equality? And how do we spread the message when it feels like average citizens don't have a voice?
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding. Spread which message and keep them safe how? There's about a half dozen different ideas about how. Yeah.
Well, trans,
Okay.
equity, diversity. I mean, everybody, companies right and left are taking out equity and diversity, and you have kids that have special needs, you have kids that are gay, and they're banning books, and it's a very frightening time. How do we spread the message to the kids and in schools that this is not right? And how do we as average citizens stand up and say this is not okay?
You stand up and say this is not okay, like this on social media, elsewhere. And I think, one of the big arguments, the far right has taken on the notion that therefore free speech, except you can't say gay and you can't say trans. They want to pretend that those people don't exist. Well, they do exist. And we need to push back on that as a challenge to free speech, a challenge to equal rights, a challenge to people's right to exist and be healthy. I think you have to make that argument, and I've done that. I voted against the defense bill a month or so ago, 2 months ago now, because Mike Johnson insisted on putting an anti-trans provision in the bill that would deny access to health care for trans youth. Okay, you stand up, you speak out, you talk about equality. And also, I think humanizing it is really important. Show the people who are being impacted by it. There's one particular family that I met, probably 10 years ago now, who was a military family that had a trans child who were struggling. And we made some changes in the law. She got the help she needed and is doing great now. Tell those stories about how it's impacting real life individuals. Part of the way that we were finally able to overcome the bigotry against gay marriage was to start showing them, the next door neighbor who you really like, he's gay. Okay. Your nephew, gay. These are people who you like and know that are part of your community. They're human beings and they deserve equal rights. And it had a profound impact. We have to continue to do that again. And we have to point out, the cruelty and the brutality of trying to act like, gay people and trans people don't exist. I mean, every day, my office, unfortunately, is on the same floor as Marjorie Taylor Greene's. She just moved into the neighborhood. I was joking, I want to call the homeowners association and file a complaint. But she's got a billboard up out in front of her office saying there are only two genders, men and women. Therefore, I guess trans people don't exist, except that they do exist. And we need to push back against that to make sure that their rights and their basic right to exist is protected.
Thank you, Congressman. Our next caller is Patrick from Kent. Patrick, you are live on the call with the Congressman. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Hey, Congressman Smith, I am very concerned about what Elon Musk is doing with our Social Security numbers. What is Congress doing?
Yeah. Number one biggest thing we do, we've got a lawsuit in federal court telling he shouldn't have access to it. And a court said that. A court blocked him from having access to some of the information, blocked him from having access to healthcare records. So the best thing we can do right now is sue to block his access. And we've had a couple of successes in that regard, and we need to continue to push that. And then the other thing we need to do, again, is convince enough of the country that this is completely wrong to start putting pressure on Republican members of Congress so they push back. Look, it's the worst thing I've ever seen in my 28 years in Congress. I've never seen a party roll over so much for one person. No matter what Trump says, they just salute and keep moving forward. That's starting to bend a little bit in the last couple of days because of the pushback. Keep pushing, make them bend, and make them stand up for, in this case, the privacy rights of their constituents. Okay? To give that type of access for healthcare records and tax records and Social Security records, to turn the privacy over to a private individual who Donald Trump says isn't even really in charge of Doge. I mean, that's a violation of the law, and we need the judges to uphold it, and we need to push that, and that's what we're doing and what we're going to keep doing.
Our next call is from George of Renton. George, you are live on the call with the Congressman. Please go ahead, George.
Hi, Congressman. I very much appreciate your efforts. A lot of us on the call, I would imagine, know what you're doing and see your emails and reply to the little surveys there that are on the end. Hope they do anyway. Anyway, everything that you said, I agree. I think we're losing the country that I love so much, and you can see it on a path to something that is foreign. And having spent time a lot of time in Eastern Europe and even in Ukraine and understanding what a authoritarian country really is, I don't think Americans understand that and don't even know what the consequences of this trajectory are. My question to you is, and I understand you're doing what you can, I think the obvious thing is that there needs to be some faces that explain things to the American people that are representing Democrats or even some of the moderate Republicans or whoever, just something to explain, somebody to explain that has some credibility, don't have the facts messed up, have the credibility to say things like, firing 200,000 people from the government, if their salaries and benefits and all that total to $200,000, which they don't, but I'll just use that number. That's only $40 billion.
Yeah,
we're going to cut some other spending and all. Yeah. So we're going to do 4.5 trillion. We're going to add 450 billion a year to deficit. We're going to sidle up to Putin. I think you guys need a face. One of them could be you. I know. Yeah. I hope something like that's going on in the background. Could you explain?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple different aspects to that. First of all, I am doing everything that I can. I do several videos a day. I miss the occasional day, getting on social media, trying to figure out how to expand that. I'm reaching out, trying to get on podcasts. If there's any cable news opportunity, I take it, and I regularly send out messages in a variety of different ways. Now, not a lot of people know who I am outside of the 9th District. Some do. I mean, I've been involved in national, and it helps. We've got a lot of other people who are engaged in that process. We've got a lot of voices, but I actually agree with you. And I'm putting pressure. Hakeem Jeffries is the person who I think could be that face and that voice. He is the minority leader of the Democrats. I think he's articulate. He's younger than I am anyway. I think he's got the ability to be that messenger. And I think he needs to be, because what we've got right now, we've got a lot of different voices in a lot of different places. Well, let me break it down for you in two ways. One, I think it is important, like you said, to have a central voice. And I was thinking, and it's not necessarily the best example, but during COVID, Andrew Cuomo, governor of New York, he did like, I think it was like doing daily press conferences. Now, truth of the matter is, I don't know that Andrew Cuomo was doing that good a job in New York of containing COVID, as it turned out, but he was there. He was on television every day, doing press conferences, talking about it, and became sort of a place that people could go who were concerned about it. And he's an articulate guy. I mean, I don't agree with a lot of different aspects of his policy, but he articulates the message very well. I think we need that. And I've been making these suggestions to our leadership team. Frankly, I think Hakeem should set up a daily presser. Okay. Every day he's going to go out there for an hour. He's going to make a statement. He's going to take all questions and he's going to give people guidance. Here's what we need to do today. Now, I will say we had a caucus meeting yesterday and Hakeem and a whole bunch of different people in our leadership said, here's the message. All you 215 members of Congress on the Democrats, here's what you ought to be saying. Go to your local papers, as I've been doing. Talk about how you met with local Head Start people, how you met with people doing cancer research or whatever the issue is and the way it's impacting them. Make it real, bring it home, do it district by district. I think that's important. What we're lacking right now is that central national voice, okay, to deliver the message in a consistent way. Now, the second part of this is, and I hate to be overly judgmental, but some people are better at this than other people. I did a video on this the other day, which I said we got to get messengers out there, but we got to pick people who are effective. And I mentioned Jamie Raskin, Pat Ryan, AOC, Joe Neguse. These are people who I think articulate it well, and the way I said it in my little Instagram video or wherever it is my staff puts what I say out there in the social media world was think about it this way: if you were on trial for your life, would you want that person arguing your case? I'd want Jamie Raskin doing that. And I think we need to make those judgments. Not everybody can communicate clearly. I happen to believe that it's one of the things that I'm reasonably effective at. That's why I'm doing so much of it, is trying to keep delivering that message. But I agree with you. We need that central messenger. The governors are great. We got attorney generals, but they're all piecemeal off the state. We need something where on a day in and day out basis, we show that there's a war room in place. And every day we are trying to come up with how to make the best arguments and push back in the most effective way. And I'm going to continue to push our caucus to better organize that and better deliver that message. That said, there are a lot of elected Democrats who day in and day out are delivering the message as aggressively as possible. And I think it's starting to help. It is. But as I said earlier, the answer to the question, can we do more? Absolutely. We can and we should do more. And those are some of the ideas that I've been kicking around for how to do that.
Thank you, Congressman. We've got a question from Dan submitted from Facebook. Dan says, it's been suggested for Democrats to start holding town hall style meetings in Republican held districts. What are your thoughts on this? And would you be willing to go out of district to lead such events?
Yeah, no, I think that's a decent idea. There's legalities around it in terms of who would have to pay for that. We'd have to raise that money on the private side because I don't know that you're allowed to do that by congressional ethics rules outside of your district. But yes, no, I think that's a good idea, and I think we need to find ways to do that to drive home that message. Now, here in Washington State, I'd have to drive for a while before I'd get to a Republican district. But yeah, I'd be willing to do that. Now, I will also say that when you're thinking about doing that, you got to think about who's going to be an effective messenger. And this is part of the message I've been delivering. A message that's going to work in my 70% Democratic district isn't the same message that's going to work in Yakima, okay? Or the same message that's going to work in the middle of Iowa or Alabama. And it's something I've been pleading with folks within the left side of the political spectrum. We have to reestablish our credibility on some important issues, because there's a lot of people in this country who are very concerned about what Trump is doing for a variety of different reasons, who still don't trust Democrats. And they don't trust Democrats because of some of the positions we've taken on issues that they don't like. Now, I will grant you Some of that are centrist policies around economics that lean too much into trade, didn't do enough to help working people. But a lot of it also is abolish ICE on immigration. The idea of ending enforcement of immigration, major problem. The whole defund police movement and efforts that have continued since that movement died to undermine personal responsibility and accountability in our criminal justice system. Some of the efforts that we've made on homelessness and drug abuse around here that have been inefficient, incompetent, in many instances too permissive. I mean, I have a long riff about my concerns about the King County Regional Homelessness Authority and how it was set up. Too much of a focus on identity politics, not enough of a focus on results, on actually helping people. But yeah, if a Democrat wanted to go deliver that message in a Republican district, you'd have to be ready for those questions, okay? Because this is great. I mean, I got a 70% Democratic district. I'm hearing from the people who are there. But, if you show up in a Republican district, they're going to ask you, why did Biden let so many people across the border? How come he didn't secure our borders? Okay. Why, do we have, so much crime in urban areas controlled by Democrats? You're going to get challenges on identity politics. You're going to get questions about things that your average Democrat, is going to have to think a little bit differently to answer effectively. But I think that's what we need to do, is to broaden the base of support. So yeah, getting into Republican areas. The one thing I do, I don't go to Republican districts necessarily, but I'm on Fox, I'm on, Newsmax. I even went on One America News. I go on whatever podcast I can get on. I've been on Jordan Peterson's podcast, who's sort of a darling of the right. I'd go on Joe Rogan's podcast if they'd give me the opportunity. We need to get into the spaces where Republicans are driving their message and offer a counter message. Now, again, it's got to be an effective one, all right? It can't be one that is too far left or doesn't appeal to the people you're talking to. Yes, 100%. We have got to get into spaces that are not terribly sympathetic to Democrats, and we got to build support there.
Thank you, Congressman. Once again, folks, please remember to press *3 if you'd like to ask a question. And if you're enjoying this update, I encourage you to press *6 on your telephone keypad now to sign up for the Congressman's e-newsletter. Congressman, your next question comes from Dan of Kent. Dan, you are live on the call. Please go ahead and ask your question, Dan.
Hi, Congressman Smith. While I'm a Democrat and I don't want to hand Republicans any wins, just like they did with the border bill last session, I'm interested in how we can leverage this push for the Department of Government Efficiency to find these waste, frauds, and abuse in the Defense Department. There's some reporting suggesting 7,500% markup on hand sanitizer. Is there any opportunity to leverage this to help maybe push along this idea to audit the Pentagon?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, I reached out. I asked for a meeting with Elon Musk. Apparently, I don't rate, so I wasn't able to get that. But they did send over one of their flunkies from the Doge movement to talk to me. And that's the pitch that I made. And that's, what is so disappointing about the way Trump is going after this and Musk is going after this. Look, waste, fraud, and abuse, inefficiency in government is a thing. Okay, no doubt about it. But primarily, it's driven by rules, regulations, and requirements. It's not driven by employees. Okay, so in fact, very few people know this, but the federal workforce has stayed flat in real numbers for 40 years. Okay, we haven't hired a ton more employees. And I'm not talking about as adjusted for inflation or population, flat in real numbers. All right. So I was interested because I have long been frustrated by the inefficiencies in the Pentagon, by the number of requirements and regulations and a culture that values process instead of results. I think there's a real opportunity. I'm just about finished with the biography of Elon Musk that Walter Isaacson wrote. And when Musk is talking about how he built SpaceX and Tesla and how he had a very aggressive, creative way of getting to the results, one of the things he said is the best way to get something done is to assume that any requirement is stupid until proven otherwise. Okay? Challenge those assumptions, get to results. That would be great. That's not what they're doing. Okay? They are targeting people based on whether or not they're loyal to Trump, first of all. And second of all, just firing a whole bunch of them and canceling programs somewhat randomly. There's no effort to get at efficiency or effectiveness. So, yeah, no, I think if they were serious about this, but please take a step back for a moment and understand what's happening here. There's all kinds of rhetoric about, efficiency, effectiveness, and, the debt and deficit. You got two people, Trump and Musk, who fundamentally believe that they should have unchecked power. That's what this is about. Now, let's be charitable for the moment, and let's assume that both of them believe that because they simply believe that they are so uniquely talented that the world is going to be a better place if all of us bow down and do whatever they say. I happen to think that it's a little bit more nefarious than that. But even if they believe that, it's not good because they're not as smart as they think they are. A, and B, representative democracy and hearing other voices is the best way to actually getting to better results. So they're not coming in here to make things more efficient, more effective. They're coming in here to assert dominance and control. And that's how all of this makes sense. Now, if we want to pivot that back around and say, yeah, let's have the Doge that really is about government efficiency. Yeah, there's a ton of opportunities, and particularly at the Pentagon. And I'm going to keep pushing to try to get them to look at it that way. But right now, as I said, they're not trying to fix it. They're trying to smash it. By it, I mean the federal government.
Thank you, Congressman. Your next question comes from Leah of Federal Way. Leah, you are live on the call. Please go ahead and ask your question, Leah.
Hi, Congressman. Thank you for taking my question. I do have a lot to say, but I was going to ask my question. So what is the recourse, if any, when Trump refuses to follow court orders? Does the Supreme Court have any jurisdiction, or do they have the ability to stop him from steamrolling our country into a full-blown authoritarianism? It's pretty clear from where I sit that Trump's vendetta is not only for the judicial system that tried to, hold him accountable for his crimes, but he also, in my opinion, has a clear vendetta out for the United States, period. He's very dangerous
he definitely,
at this point.
He wants to restore control. And as I mentioned, he's fired a whole bunch of people at the Justice Department and elsewhere based primarily on a loyalty test. But the answer to your question is there are sort of three pieces to this. First of all, when you talk about the Supreme Court, that's sort of the appellate process. So you got a federal district court, you got the appellate court, and then you got the Supreme Court, which is the ultimate appellate court. And if any of those courts, you typically go to federal district court first. If they make a ruling, that ruling has the force of law. Now, it can be appealed to the appellate court. Sometimes the Supreme Court comes in and takes it right up immediately. And ultimately, it can wind up in the Supreme Court. Sometimes not, though. Sometimes the federal district court level or the appellate court level becomes the ultimate authority. So first of all is, yes, it could go up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court can make the final decision. But the second question is, when a federal court makes a decision and Trump doesn't obey it, then what? Well, this is not unprecedented. There are many times when people don't obey decisions of the court. And then what the court can do is they can issue sanctions. The example that you've probably seen on TV is when, a lawyer in a courtroom does something and the judge asks that lawyer to stop and they don't, they sanction them. In some cases, they throw them in jail overnight. They hold them in contempt of court. If you don't do what the court says you're supposed to do, that's contempt. And the options on contempt are you can fine them or you can incarcerate them. So that would be the next step if, in fact, Trump disobeys the court order. And that would quite likely go all the way up to the Supreme Court. And yes, anticipating your next thought, that makes me nervous too. Because the Supreme Court right now has three who are appointed by Democrats, who are interested in the rule of law. And it has it has two in Alito and Thomas who make it very clear that they are simply partisan hacks at this point. Forgive me, I know there's probably Republicans listening who are deeply offended by that, but that's my conclusion. I look at the decisions that Alito and Thomas have made. They don't seem remotely interested in the rule of law. But then you've got four others who are periodically interested in trying to maintain the credibility of the court, led by Justice Roberts and some others. And it'd be really interesting to see if the Supreme Court is willing to stand up to Trump and stand up to the rule of law. Now, this is the same Supreme Court that just about 6 months ago, maybe less, issued that ruling about how presidents do have some degree of immunity from being held accountable for their actions, that they are, in this court's opinion, somewhat above the law in certain circumstances. Now, that wasn't blanket and sweeping, but it was troubling nonetheless. So, yeah, then you'd have to have the court. And then the other recourse is the public. We do still have a democracy, knock on wood. And we'll see how long it lasts. But Republican members of Congress, they're going to be up for election in 26. And the more town hall meetings that they have and the more pushback they get, the more they're going to want to make a different decision than simply following Trump. And that's why building the support, district by district, community by community, until it's nationwide, is helpful. I know it's frustrating. Believe me, I see what Trump's doing. I see how it's impacting people. I get the calls as we're trying to, rescue USAID workers from, dangerous parts of the world who were just abandoned. I see the funding cut off for cancer research. I see the risks at the Nuclear Safety Agency. And you want to go fix it like now. Okay, this is urgent. This is not something that we can build support for. But that's kind of what we have to do. We have to be really focused and never give up and be patient in terms of how we organize it. And the courts are one avenue that needs to be pursued.
Thank you, Congressman. Our next caller is Steve from Mercer Island. Steve, please go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, Congressman Smith. Thank you very much for all your effort. Obviously, you're doing a lot. A couple other people that called, and one like to go to the Republicans in their district, I think it's a great idea. But you did bring up something that I think you'd be overwhelmed with possibly, and other congressmen like yourself would be that they would come back to you and say, why did Biden do this? Why did Biden do that, etc. But I think right now the thing is that somehow you got to get to the Republicans who are really upset about what's going on, and you're covering this, I know, and I'm repeating some or saying things that you've actually covered, but you need to get them to contact the representatives and let them know they're damn mad and they've been lied to, and that some of them are finding that out now. So I really I think that we can wait for the court system to go, and by the time the court system gets through with things, it could be that it's going to be too late to save a whole bunch of things, like all the agencies are being shut down, people out of jobs. It's really a timing thing right now to some extent. And I'll stop, but you can. I'm just joking here, but you give my disregards to MTG if you see her in the hall from one of your constituents. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Yes, no, I appreciate that, and yeah, no, I think you're right. We have to be prepared to make those more difficult arguments and address some of the legitimate concerns. But look, I'll say something I said earlier. I think we have to go into the world of people who are Trump supporters, and I think the method of saying, look, I think Trump is bent on an authoritarian takeover of the country. I do. I do not believe that all of his supporters are bent on that or support that. I don't. I'm not going to cast aspersions at every single Trump supporter out there. I'm going to try to work with them and also learn occasionally, and if they come back and say, well, the reason I did is because, what are you doing about that? I think it's a legit question. What are we doing about some of the challenges? But one big thing to understand, Trump is primarily in office because the country believed he would be better on the economy. 1 month into it, it's the 1 month anniversary, by the way, of Trump's second term, there's no evidence that he's really doing anything to try to help the economy. And he's flailing around in a whole bunch of different directions, as I keep mentioning, talking about Greenland and Gaza and Canada and Panama. He's pulling security clearances from people. He's given pardons to people who violently assaulted police officers. He's randomly firing tens of thousands of federal employees and shutting down programs. What's he doing about inflation? What's he doing for the economy? What's he doing to help grow manufacturing jobs? To help working people get more pay and benefits? Nothing. Okay, so I think that is the most compelling argument. James Carville, it's the economy, stupid, right? Well, Trump's contempt right now is he's saying, I won. I think you people are going to let me do whatever I want to do, so much so that I'm not even going to pretend to be paying attention to the economy. And I think we need to call him on that.
Thank you, Congressman. We've got our next caller is Michael from Federal Way. Michael, you're live on the call with the Congressman. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Hello, Congressman. Hey, thanks for taking my call. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I got you loud and clear.
Hey, that's fantastic. Hey, I'm a strong union supporter, and my wife actually called in. But, the thing that really upsets me with the Democratic Party is, we're always playing this defensive game. And it's time, you talk about the things that we should be doing, and we're always on the defensive about what Donald Trump's going to do. We need to get out in front of him. One of the things that he's doing now is the naturalization and the birthright. We got to get out in front of that now. We got to get out in front of what he's trying to do for a third presidential term. We've got to cut him off. The only way to deal with these kind of people is with strength. And for far too long, the Democratic Party has been playing this weak kind of gentle giant because we've had the support of all the union members. And that union support has gone a wayside. I've been a union member for 35 years, and I can't tell you, but 35 to 60% of the union membership has gone to the Republican Party, and that's just appalling. We have to change that, and the way to change this is to get out in front of it. So the things that Donald Trump wants to do, he wants a third term. What are you going to do to make sure that you insist that that never happens?
Yeah, well, I am going to do what I've been saying. I'm going to convince enough of the country that that's a really bad idea for a whole series of reasons, that we undermine any public support that he could possibly have to attempt to do that. That's what we can do. I can't, physically walk down to the White House and physically restrain him from doing it. We have to win the argument. And frankly, I think you hit upon one of the big aspects where we're losing the argument. And I really hear you on the union part. I grew up in SeaTac. My father worked at United Airlines as a baggage handler, union guy, machinist union. The machinists organized the airport at that time, the airport workers. I've seen union workers move away. And I think they moved away because Democrats haven't focused enough on core working class economic issues. Now, I will say this, for all the grief that Joe Biden got, he did, really focus on manufacturing. And we actually had an increase in manufacturing jobs under the Biden administration. The CHIPS Act and the other efforts to try to, offshore away from our dependence upon China. There was a lot of things that we did. Now, I don't think that President Biden did a good job of messaging those things. But yes, the way to go on offense, I would suggest, is not so much to go on offense and say, here's what I'm going to do to stop Trump from getting a third term. The way to go on offense is to say, here's what Democrats are going to do to help working people. I think that's the most important message that we need to drive home to get back those union members. I don't think those union members are supporting Donald Trump because they want to see him be made king. They're supporting him because they grew frustrated with Democrats not doing enough for working people.
Thank you, Congressman. We have time for one question, sir, before we wrap up the call. Chris has submitted a question on Facebook, and Chris asks, what are the most important forms of citizen activism for us to engage in that will help Democrats in the House? In other words, how can we become a better tool for you to wield?
Yeah, I think that is the definitive question. I mentioned the leadership that we need to sort of give some guidance out there for people like you who want to contribute. I frankly, I think, pick whatever forum you want. Social media is really important. You know, get on Twitter, on Blue Sky, on Instagram, on all of those different message formats. Put your message, put your opinion out there, and tell real stories. Contribute your voice to that. Then I think it's also important that you contact elected officials. It's important, frankly, to contact Democrats, but it's also important to contact Republicans. And then in the modern era, what Republicans did a really good job of the last campaign was, going after people in non-traditional spaces. People form their political opinions in different places than they used to. We're not all sitting down. I'm going to age myself. We're not all sitting down and watching Walter Cronkite, and then we can all talk to each other about it. You are probably on group chats. Maybe you play video games and you're on Twitch and you have conversations with people, or you're in a group chat with a different group of people. Use the message, use the people that you are close to deliver your message. I think we've sort of, to some degree, retreated into our own spaces. I talked about how I get out there into other spaces on Fox News, on One America News, on Joe Rogan's podcast, whatever. We need people who are concerned about what Trump is doing to get into those spaces too. Don't shut off your relatives who start talking about how great Trump is. Make your case, okay? And regularly contact Democrats like me with ideas. I mean, the basic idea of getting into Republican districts and making your case, that's a good idea. I welcome those ideas. Now, I will say, a lot of people contact me. Not every idea that you have is going to be a winner, okay? And just because your elected official doesn't do exactly what it is you ask, don't assume that he doesn't care. I have bad ideas. But when you get enough people involved, and you can look through those ideas and say, okay, I've got 5. Those 2 are great. But you need to be sending them to us. You need to be sending them on the different formats, on Facebook, where the question came from. Put those ideas out there. And then always be thinking about how to make the best message. The message that's going to appeal to people who might not already agree with us. Okay. And that's why I focus on the economy. I focus on working people. I think, if you talk about those issues, that's going to connect with a broader range of people. It's a collective effort. And I'll end where I started. Look, for those of you who've known me for a while, I am not I'm not a Chicken Little type of person. I don't spend all my time running around, oh, the sky is falling, oh my God. I don't panic all over the place on a whole bunch of different things. It's not I take the world as it comes and try to deal with it, all right? And don't get all overly exaggerated. And I'm telling you, this is an incredibly dangerous time. I honestly believe that what the Trump administration, what Elon Musk are doing is a fundamental threat to the concept of representative democracy. And I am absolutely committed to trying to push back on that in any way possible to effectively preserve our democratic form of government and make sure that we're providing the best possible government that we can to the people of this country. And as I said, I also acknowledge that part of that is making sure that my party does a better job of governing, does a better job of addressing the issues that the people care about, and learns from some of our mistakes. I think we have to do both. We have to be very, very direct about the challenge that we think Trump presents to this country. And then we have to be, I guess, open enough to listening to ideas about what we might have been doing wrong and how we need to do better. And I'm going to keep trying to do that. I'm going to do another one of these on Sunday because there's been a ton of demand and things are moving quick. So Sunday afternoon at 3, we'll be making the phone calls again. And I am soon going to do public town hall meetings as well. So thank you for participating. I think this was incredibly helpful for me. Let's stay in touch and keep working on all these issues.
Thank you, Congressman, and thank you to everyone on tonight's call. You can sign up to receive Congressman Smith's newsletter updates at adamsmith.house.gov or simply stay on the line. At the sound of the tone, you'll be able to leave a message. Please spell out your name and email address slowly. And thank you so much and have a blessed evening. Good night, everyone.